5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting live from the Newsmax studio in New York City. A fusion of politics, commentary, entertainment, and sports. Steve and his team bring you the latest news and opinion now. Here is Steve Malzberg.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, before we get to Carl Cannon, some news that you might have heard, you might not have heard it, and it involves, remember the three Israeli teenagers, one an American citizen, who were kidnapped and killed by Palestinians, Hamas terrorists. Well, there was an arrest, several arrests made in those murders, and those arrests were made I think several weeks ago. We haven't heard about it until late yesterday. And the main figure in the arrests allegedly took money from Hamas and got weapons from Hamas, the way the report reads, and perpetrated the kidnappings and the murders of these three Israeli teenagers. So I'm sure that once they're convicted, if they're convicted, that the Palestinian Authority and Hamas will make heroes out of them, probably name soccer stadiums after them. But that's the difference between Israeli culture and the Palestinian culture. So the arrests have been made. As you know, prior to that, an arrest in the so-called revenge killing of a Palestinian teenager, several arrests, 3 I believe, were made. 3 Israelis were arrested for that crime. But now we have word that the arrest was made by Israel in the killings of the 3 teenagers who were originally kidnapped, and many say led to this whole Gaza, Hamas, Israel war that we have just seen come to an end. Impeachment. We've been talking a lot about it. We have a poll at Newsmax. We'll tell you how to participate in that poll. And we've been talking about it a lot more recently, although it's important to point out, it's very important to point out, and by the way, that poll, if you want to go to it and vote, is newsmax.com/Obama poll, newsmax.com/Obama poll. And it's important to point out, as Carl Cannon, who we are trying to reach right now from RealClearPolitics, he's the Washington Bureau Chief, it's important to point out that elected Republican officials overwhelmingly have not only not called for Obama's impeachment, but have gone the other way and said, no, we're not going to impeach it. Mostly it's been, Sarah Palin, and there have been a few congressmen. There's been Ben Carson, who says it's a discussion that needs to be had. But you can count on one hand how many people on the Republican side are calling for impeachment. Let's go to Carl and talk to him about his great piece. Hello, Carl. How are you, sir?
Good. Can you see me all right?
I could see you fine, and
Can you hear me good?
You remind me a little now of George Bush standing on the pile at 9/11. Can you hear me? Anyway, well, he didn't say that. He said I could hear you, and one day, anyway, you know the rest. But no, we could see you and hear you fine. That certainly was. All right, let's talk about your piece here. Democrats' impeachment amnesia. And while the Democrats have falsely put forth the scenario that the Republicans are calling for the impeachment of Barack Obama, they've also, when I say they, I'm talking like Nancy Pelosi, I'm talking Sheila Jackson Lee and some others, have gone to great lengths to say, we didn't want to impeach George W. Bush. Nobody wanted to impeach George W. Bush. We had no plans to impeach George W. Bush. And especially in the case of Sheila Jackson Lee, as she was, saying that she in no way ever wanted to impeach George W. Bush, it came to light that she co-sponsored a bill that was put forth by then Congressman Kucinich to impeach George W. Bush. Am I correct?
Well, that was a sort of a spectacular brain freeze. It's comical, and I don't want to pick on Sheila Jackson Lee. I guess we can forget things we did 5 or 6 years ago. But she went on and on how. Bush had this authority to go to war in Iraq, and, he was the president. Now this president has the authority to do whatever he wants on the Affordable Care Act. And how dare these Republicans, And the White House well, not the White House, the DNC and the shadow Obama campaign, they're always sending out these fundraising letters. They just love this story. They're going to impeach the president. You've got to help us. And they're raising millions of dollars off it. But the only ones talking about impeachment, just like when Bush was president, are them.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Now, to be fair, as you point out in your piece at Real Clear Politics, you know, there are some talk show hosts. There is Sarah Palin that have talked about you know, impeaching, but the leadership of the Republican Party, and with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 or 3 congressmen, there's been nobody who has talked about impeaching Barack Obama.
Well, Steve Stockman, he's a backbencher from Texas. He's actually leaving the House. He lost to Cornyn in a one-sided primary. There's a couple of them, right? But this was articles of impeachment in 2008. Dennis Kucinich, who I'm very friendly with. I respect Dennis. He's a principled liberal. He offered these. He had 10 or 11 co-sponsors. Most of them are still in the House, and they wanted it. Yeah, that's just a historic fact. Another historic fact is that John Boehner, the current Speaker of the House, has publicly taken impeachment off the table. He's not talking about it.
Right, which is what Nancy Pelosi called for him to do, and he did it, and she still was calling for him to do it. Let me ask you about the double standard here, not only on impeachment, where you could look at that bill in the House and Sheila Jackson Lee and all that kind of stuff, but, you know, this disrespect, quote unquote, aimed towards the president, and if you say anything about the president, there's a good chance, according to Eric Holder, it's because there's racial animosity. George W. Bush, if you look at the protests against the Iraq War, if you look at what they've said about him, you know, calling him a murderer, the signs with the Bush in the crosshairs, you know, and the blood dripping down his face at the time he was president. Every name in the book, the most disgusting. Well, they made a TV movie about him being assassinated in front of a hotel while he was still president. Yet nobody's ever suffered the wrath of these racists like Barack Obama has. There's selective amnesia there too, is there not?
Well, yeah, but that's a little more cynical. The Democratic Party depends on a heavy African American turnout and an almost monolithic support among that turnout. So they have a vested interest now in saying, you know, hearing dog whistles and impugning racism to people where none exists, or where you really have to use your imagination. But this idea, think about it for a minute. Barack Obama ran for president. He was a backbencher from Illinois, a freshman senator. He barely knew where the Senate dining room was, and he was running for president. It was a very aspirational campaign, and the idea behind it was America wants to put this behind us. And he got a majority of the vote. No Democrat had done that since Lyndon Johnson. His color, his race, his background was a factor in his favor, and everybody knew it. He knew it, and I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. People vote for president for a lot of reasons, but he's elected president. He wouldn't have even been a viable candidate Dick Durbin didn't run for president. This was his story, right? And this is why George W. Bush got caught up in it. Britt Hume. It was a great moment in American history. But then once he's president, for Eric Holder to say, Jimmy Carter said it, that if you oppose him, if you don't agree with him, you're revealing racism. That's double standard. That's a hypocrisy. That's really sort of intellectually dishonest. It means that he can't be judged the way every other president has been judged.
Right, and as you point out in your piece, you quote Jimmy Carter as saying an overwhelming portion of the intensely demonstrated animosity towards President Barack Obama is based on the fact that he's a black man. I mean, Holder didn't go that far, so it's pretty definitive. But this from a guy who, just the other day wrote that, as he has been pushing for years, Israel needs to recognize Hamas. Hamas is an important political, animal, and blah 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 blah. So I don't think too many people put much faith in what Jimmy Carter has to say anymore. Let me jump ahead. Is Hillary Clinton going to be?
Wait.
I'm sorry.
Can we stay with Carter for one more second? I want to make one other.
Yeah, sure.
If you use Jimmy Carter's own standard for judging people's motives and their actions, if you use the Carter standard on Carter, you'd say he was a virulent anti-Semite, and that obviously the only The only thing that applies, his antipathy for Israel is animated towards a hatred for Jews. Now, I don't believe that, but that would be the Carter standard if you applied it to Carter.
You're absolutely right, and maybe I've been guilty of following the Carter standard on that one myself. All right, let me jump ahead to Hillary. Is this going to extend itself to now sexism or charges of gender bias and sexism? If you criticize Hillary, if you don't vote for Hillary, if you take Hillary to task, if you press her too much, if you talk about her in the same way you would talk about a male candidate, are you now going to be accused of being anti-woman if you're on the right?
Well, if the Democrats succeed in making that narrative stick, she's going to be a two-term president because 51% of the voting public, are women. And if they bring that up in a campaign that you have to vote for to prove you're not sexist, well, that'd be a pretty potent argument. I don't think most people would go for it. I do think two things, though, about Hillary. First is, I think women in this country will be proud to have her on the ticket. I think there'll be a groundswell of support. I think she will be hard for the Republicans to beat, all things being equal. They have to come up with a charismatic candidate of their own because there's going to be pride on the part of independent-minded women in this country that Hillary is running for president. The second part is if she is president, that's more of the correlation to Barack Obama. You won't be able to criticize her without being sexist. Even Hillary Clinton, she's never gone that far. I would hope that people wouldn't go there, but we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Well, yeah, although some of the media coverage, I remember when she ran against Rick Lazio for the U.S. Senate and he walked across the stage at a debate and handed her a piece of paper, and the headlines were, he invaded the space of a woman. So that might be a little prelude there. Anyway, great to talk to you, Carl. Thank you very much, sir.
Anytime.
All right, Carl Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief, Real Clear Politics. Check out realclearpolitics.com, ladies and gentlemen, here on the Steve Malzberg Show. We're coming back with the president of the resident scholar, I should say, the American Enterprise Institute, Michael Rubin.